I appreciate the invitation to be here with you all today, and it's been a while since I've been at the press club. I want to start by thanking you all for keeping people informed. I know just this past weekend, I think Washington did the annual, the Gridiron Dinner, or whatever they call it. And it's always a good time with jokes and that sort of stuff. But every year, the folks who are invited to speak also make sure that they let the media know just how important they are to keep people informed. And that is certainly the case here in Louisiana, keeping them informed on a daily basis so that they can be better citizens and that sort of thing. But most importantly, and in too many cases since I've been governor, the information that you provide actually help people to stay alive, whether it's because of hurricane or other severe weather or because of COVID and so forth. So I want to thank you for everything that you do. Today I'm going to focus on my priorities for this legislative session, and it is a fiscal session. It is the last regularly scheduled session of my second term as governor. I hope there will not be an unscheduled special session. We've had enough of those as well. But it is a fiscal session, and I think the fiscal work is really ought to be the focus of what we're doing this year. I want to start by telling you I feel very good about the budget that we presented to the legislature. And that's primarily House Bill 1, which is the next year's operating budget, but also the supplemental budget for the current year, and then the House Bill 2, which is the capital construction budget. Because of the increased investments that we're able to make this year, as reflected in the budget, I believe it is truly transformational, and it continues progress and momentum on things that I think we all believe to be a priority. And it's such a far cry from where we were the first year that I became governor. And you know, I sat down and took a look at it the other day and was comparing and contrasting because up until now, I kind of did it 1 year at a time. But to see where we are today relative to where we were in 2016 really, I think, is impressive. And I want to start by giving a lot of credit to Jay Darden and others who really helped me with the budget, but also with the legislature, and not just the one that's sitting now, but the one that was in office last term, because everything we did to fix our budget problems required at least a majority vote. In the legislature, where both the House and the Senate were primarily, or majority Republican, I should say, and as you all know, I'm a Democratic governor. But most of the big things required a 2/3 vote, which is really, really difficult to get when you're talking about revenue. But we were able to take a balanced approach, and I think really put our state on a much sounder fiscal footing. And that is showing up every single day, including with the growth and diversification of our economy and the way we're able to present the budget that the legislature has under consideration. First of all, from the very first year that I was responsible for the budget, which was fiscal year 17, we started running surpluses, and we've run surpluses in every single year. Just like your business and just like your home, I can tell you a surplus is better than a deficit. It's better than a deficit, especially when you consider what you have to do with a surplus and those things that are possible to do. You put money in the rainy day fund, you put money towards the unfunded accrued liability, and then with the one-time money, you can pay debt, you can do capital construction projects, you can have non-federal match. Those are all important things for a state like Louisiana. I guess they're important for every state. But when I became governor, we had a $2 billion deficit for that first full fiscal year, the one that I just told you we ended up running a surplus for, $2 billion short, and we had a grand total of $400 million in the bank. Today, we have a balanced budget, and we have more than $2 billion in the bank. So that one little synopsis right there kind of shows you the difference. We have 5 times the savings in the state of Louisiana that we had when I became governor. The rainy day fund, which is what we all think of as the budget stabilization fund, but we call it the rainy day fund, the primary savings account for the state. When it gets the deposit from this last surplus, 25% of that surplus, it'll have the highest fund balance in its history. But on top of that, there's a revenue stabilization fund that many of you don't know anything about. It was created in 2016, and it was purely aspirational at the time. It has more money than the budget stabilization fund. And you add just those 2 funds up, and you get to that $2 billion mark that I was talking about. And we also have been paying down debt at record levels, and we've not just paid down debt, but we've actually paid cash on some things in order to not incur debt in the first place. In the last 2 years, we've paid a total of $800 million of the state's share to the Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System that benefits the 5 parishes around greater New Orleans. And had we not done that, we would have paid out more than $1.4 billion over the coming decades in debt that we didn't even incur. So those are some of the good things that we've been doing. I want to talk a little bit about infrastructure as well. We've allocated nearly $5.5 billion to more than 2,000 infrastructure projects around the state, including 7,000 miles of road improvements. And Louisiana is set to receive approximately $1 billion over the next 5 years, just on the bridge formula program. And this is, too, is part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we're going to allocate somewhere between $270 million and $300 million of that billion in order to repair off-system local bridges, because they form part of our transportation network. And we're going to allow local government to tell us which of their bridges they want to repair or replace, which is the highest priority for them, and we're going to work with them in order to do that. And so over the next 5 years, there will be 5 times as many bridges repaired or replaced as we would have done otherwise. Speaking of the bipartisan infrastructure law, primarily through funding that it's making available, we're absolutely committed to closing the digital divide between 2029 by making sure that every address in the state of Louisiana, residential and business, has access to high-speed, affordable internet. We got started on that with $177 million of American Rescue Plan dollars. And then when we got the private match from internet service providers, it's more than $300 million that we're using to expand broadband to more than 80,000 addresses through the Gumbo program, which is a grant program that we have. And we're going to use that program to administer the next round that's going to come through the infrastructure law, where we're going to receive more than $1 billion. And again, we're going to get private match from the internet service providers, and then we will go out around the state and make sure that there is affordable high-speed internet for every address. Now, if a business owner or a homeowner chooses not to do it, that'll be their business, but it will be available to them. We're also making other long-term investments that I believe will pay dividends for generations to come. Now, you all may be aware that the House Appropriations Committee this morning has had the money bills in committee. I've been in other meetings, and I came here this morning. I haven't been able to review the committee's work and see what all the amendments did and so forth. But I will tell you that we have an opportunity to really make large investments at education at every level. Early childhood, K through 12, and higher ed. I got some indication this morning very briefly that the Appropriations Committee may have moved a fair amount of that money out of the budget. Not sure why they would do that. Didn't know that education ceased to be a priority. But we're going to continue to work with the legislature. This is the first step in the process. And again, we've got to go back and go through all the amendments and see what actually was done. But we were included in our budget was the largest new investment in early childhood in terms of state general fund in our history. Incredibly important. I believe, and the experts confirm this, if we want to change education, if we want to have better outcomes, it has to start in early childhood education. And we have to have more 1 and 2 and 3-year-olds and in quality settings for early childhood education. Then you've got to sustain that for a generation. And when we do, we will make a difference that we've never been able to make before. So it's my hope to work with the legislature to make sure that that funding stays in, especially since, and this is critically important, the federal government for next year will not be giving us the stimulus, the COVID stimulus for early childhood. And that was a tremendous amount of money. So we got to make sure that we're making the investments we can make so that we don't lose ground unnecessarily. Also looking for a teacher pay raise. Look, it remains true that the number one ingredient for education is to have a professional, well-educated, motivated teacher in that classroom. Quite frankly, we don't have enough teachers today. We have too many who are leaving the profession, and we don't have enough entering into our colleges of education to go into the classroom. And then you look at what our neighboring states have done over the last year or two with very large pay raises. And that's why I believe that we need to have a $3,000 pay raise for our teachers. It is in the budget that I presented. That budget is balanced. And the REC will meet again in May. I actually believe the most likely outcome of that meeting is there'll be additional recurring state general fund that we can invest. But critically important that we make that investment so that we can keep the teachers and get the teachers that we need. And then the budget for higher education continues, work that we've been doing over the last several years to make significant new and needed investments in higher education as well. Quite frankly, I don't think there is a way for us to become the state we all aspire to be if we don't invest in education. And the key to that is you can't just do it for a year or two and then stop. You've got to maintain the investments in education if you're going to produce the results that you want. One of the bills that you may have read about would waive the mandatory fees for members of the National Guard. Since I've been governor, we have called on our National Guard over and over and over again. They already have a waiver for tuition, but on the mandatory fees, they don't. We need to do that so that we can have the readiness that we need in the ranks of the National Guard. That's a bill that's been authored by Representative Ken Brass. And then we need to make sure that we statutorily create the Cybersecurity Commission, something I did by executive order. Barry Milligan has that. The National Guard is a very big player in that, along with GOSEP. And this is about cybersecurity defense, making sure that we have the people who are ready to go to respond to incidents. And you all read, in fact, you all write those stories. You have an idea of how often that happens, but we want to put ourselves in the very best position possible with respect to cyber. And then you know that I want to raise the minimum wage, something I've been trying to do since I became governor. And I just want you all to ponder $7.25. That's the minimum wage in Louisiana. Has been since 2009. It hasn't changed. We don't have our own minimum wage. The state of Louisiana relies on the federal minimum wage. It hasn't been changed since 2009. Clearly, we need to make sure that there is a higher floor than that, so that people receive a decent wage for their work. I also believe that and by the way, there are bills by Senator Gary Carter and Representative Ed Larvadain to deal with that. But speaking of employment, I'd like to remind people, because sometimes we lose sight of it, because of the diversification and growth of our economy, we have more people working today than has ever been measured in the month of March, which those are the numbers we're looking at right now. 24 months where the monthly unemployment rate was lower than it had been 1 year earlier. 24 months. And in addition to that, we now have more Louisianans working than ever before. The total number of Louisianans working. And so we know that very few people work for the minimum wage of $7.25. That's why it seems an especially good time to raise that floor. And we need to show that we care about workers and their families, particularly their children. And of course, that's also why we need to make sure that we're paying fairly. We have the largest gender pay gap in the country. Women make about 2/3 of what a man makes when they have similar qualifications doing the same job. For women of color, it's closer to 50 cents on the dollar. That is offensive to me. It's just wrong. And I would ask yourselves, how many children do we keep in poverty needlessly because we refuse to pay their parents what they should be paid when they go to work? We can and should do better. You know that my first act as governor was to expand Medicaid. That continues to be the easiest big decision that I've made, and it continues to pay dividends for us. And I think that is incredibly important. And it helped us solve our budget problems. We now have an uninsured rate that is lower than the national average. We haven't had any hospitals close. I mean, I could just go on and on about the benefits of Medicaid expansion. I also believe that it's important that workers have the ability to access medical care, meaning that they get to keep their appointments. And so paid family leave is really important, both in the private sector and in the public sector. We've got bills by Representative Amy Freeman and Sam Jenkins, please don't tell them I messed their names up, that would deal with those two things. And then you know that I'm asking the legislature to create exceptions in terms of the ban on abortion, because when you think about a crime victim, and by definition that's what we're talking about, rape and incest, these are crime victims, and sometimes very young. And I don't believe the force of law, of state law, should require a crime victim to carry their rapist baby to term should they choose not to do that because of, for whatever reason, but it could be a physical health issue, could be an emotional health issue, you name it. So I am asking the legislature to create those exceptions. We're working to make sure that we incentivize more insurance companies to write policies in Louisiana to create more competition, to drive down premiums, depopulate citizens, and so forth. Easier said than done. I mean, this is really difficult. Quite simply, if you go back to 2020, although last year we had a really good year on named storms, the 2 previous years we had 5 major hurricanes, 2 of them the strongest to ever hit the state of Louisiana. And then even last year when we got a break, Florida didn't, and they had a very strong hurricane, Hurricane Ian, and these insurance companies right across state lines. And so some of the companies that had exposure last year in Florida actually stopped writing in Louisiana. But there's some things we can do through the Incentive Fund that we're working with the Commissioner of Administration on and with the legislature. The Fortify Roof program promises to deliver good results over time, and it has elsewhere as well. Senator Jay Luno has Jim circling. I'm almost finished here, Jim. Jay Luno has Senate Bill 11, which I think is really important because and it came out of committee. The first time that bill came out of committee, it would, on auto insurance, it would say you shouldn't have to pay more simply because you're a female. That makes sense to me. Let's see. The last thing I asked the legislature to do, and for the first time, was to end the death penalty. I think that time has come based on the fact that in 20 years, we've executed one person on death row and we've exonerated 6. We've executed 1, we've exonerated 6, and hundreds of millions of dollars has been spent over that time period to have capital punishment in Louisiana. It starts when the individual is charged, and all the additional costs go up, both on the prosecution side and on the defense side, almost all of which in every case is funded by the taxpayer, and then to actually have death row itself. So I think we can do better than that. I don't believe that it is a deterrent to crime. It isn't necessary for public safety. And quite frankly, I think it's inconsistent with promoting a culture of life, since it by definition promotes a culture of death. And the example that we're setting for the people of Louisiana, and especially young people, is that it's okay to resort to violence and death to settle a score. I just don't think it makes sense for us in 2023. So with that, I am going to stop my prepared remarks. Look, thank you all very much. It's been a great lunch to come and share with you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.